How are we doing, Bulls Nation? We are now 3 days away. Yes, 3 days away from the Bulls' first playoff game against the Milwaukee Bucks on Sunday. I don't know about you guys, but I am counting down the days for the playoffs to begin. But as we await for the Bulls to start their postseason, you know on this channel that every Wednesday, yes, normally Wednesday, I realize today is Thursday, but you know I feature a series between your hot takes and your would you rathers. Because I had Big Dave on this channel yesterday, I decided to push the hot takes out to today. But either way, if you're new to the channel, well, first of all, be sure to subscribe if you like the content. But second, feel free to leave your hot takes in the comments below to be featured in next week's videos. But with that said, let's get back into some of these hot takes for the week, shall we? So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bull Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Our first take comes to us from JNJ. We should pick up Frank Vogel. After firing Donovan, he'd be a great/perfect coach for this current/future Bulls team and likely the answer at the head coach position. Well, first of all, I highly doubt this front office is going to fire Billy Donovan after this season. Even if the Bulls get swept, this front office, as I've said before, really doubled down on their decision to hire Billy Donovan. And I think some of it would be a pride thing to admit defeat and making the wrong decision just after 2 seasons. As frustrated as I have been with Billy Donovan at times, there are aspects about him as a coach that I do like as it relates to player development and building trust with his players, which is actually more valuable to have as a coach than most people probably think. But yes, sometimes his X's and O's, his rotations, and his in-game adjustments are pretty bad. But regardless, Billy Donovan isn't going to get fired. Not at least this season anyway. But as far as Frank Vogel, no, I don't really think he's the answer. I actually think Vogel is a pretty average coach. I know he did just win the title with the Lakers in the bubble, and I know the Lakers' struggles this season weren't all on him, but it's pretty bad as a coach with the talent level that you have to miss the play-in. Again, not all on him, but it's a bad look either way. What I will say, though, is I actually think picking up Frank Vogel as an assistant coach to put on Billy Donovan's staff would actually be a nice pickup because Vogel is a very defensive-minded coach, and we could use someone like that on the coaching staff to improve the Bulls' overall defense going into next season. Next, we've got Russell Westbrook. I would highly consider a trade of Donovan Mitchell for Zach Lavine if the Jazz did decide to move on from him and keep Gobert. So I've seen a lot of takes like this recently, really over the past couple of months or so, because there have been rumblings that Donovan Mitchell isn't happy in Utah. The Jazz, after finishing with the best record in the league last season, struggled to get out of the second round, even though the Clippers lost Kawhi Leonard in that series. And this season, the Jazz struggled towards the end of the year, kind of like the Bulls actually, and they finished 5th and will be going up against the Dallas Mavericks in the first round. Now, if the Jazz lose in the first round of the playoffs, Quinn Snyder is probably going to be out as head coach, which, now that I think about it, that would be an interesting prospect for the Bulls as their head coach. But if the Jazz lose in the first round, yeah, I could see Donovan Mitchell wanting out because Mitchell is a big name in the NBA. He's 25 and in the peak of his prime and playing in a small market. He seems like the type of player that wants to play in a big market on a big stage. And it would be one thing if the Jazz were winning and making title runs, but they're not. The other reason this trade proposal is interesting is because whenever the question comes up about whether the Bulls should give Zach Lavine a max contract or not, the common response that I always get is, well, what other options do the Bulls have? You're not going to get anyone better at that position than Zach Lavine. Lavine is one of the better shooting guards in the league, and you would be setting yourself back trying to go after another player. Well, yes, that's mostly true, but Donovan Mitchell is one of the few exceptions to that, and because Donovan Mitchell is on a max contract that goes all the way through 2026, salary-wise, you can make a sign and trade work by giving Zach a max contract. Now, as for who is better between Donovan Mitchell and Zach Lavine, they're pretty close in terms of their skill set and impact on the floor. I would say Mitchell probably has the slight advantage because he's a bit younger at 25 versus Zach Lavine, who's 27. Zach is a more efficient scorer, but a lower efficiency rating overall as a player because Mitchell generally turns the ball over a little less frequently than Zach does. Mitchell also is a better passer and generally speaking a better defender. I don't know, honestly, it's pretty close. I think a lot will tell us in the future about Zach Lavine and his future with the Bulls depending on how he shows up in the playoffs. But I do think this is one of those sign-in trades that is intriguing if the Bulls were to move on from Lavine. Not saying that they will, because I think ultimately they're going to re-sign him, but this would be one of those scenarios where the Bulls could try and come out a bit ahead if they don't see Zach in their long-term plans. Next, we've got the Benny. Trade Vooch and Coby for Clint Capella or Rudy Gobert. Everyone wants the Jazz players, man. Well, the Jazz would laugh in your face if you offered up Vucevic and Coby for Gobert. I mean, you're talking about a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He might even win it again this year. A 5-time All-Defensive Team player, 4-time All-NBA player. You know, he's also in the peak of his prime as well. You think the Jazz would just trade him for Vucevic after the season he just had and also being 31 years old? And Coby White, who is, yes, young, but also one of the more inconsistent players in the NBA who can't play defense? No, that's just not happening. Now, Clint Capella, on the other hand, that's a more feasible option, although as good of a fit as Capella would be on the Bulls with his rebounding and defensive abilities, trading for Vucevic and Coby is likely too much for a guy like Capella. I mean, the Hawks would have to throw in another piece to really make it worth it, but that one is a little more palatable than trying to move Vooch and Coby for Gobert. Also, the salaries don't really work in either of these scenarios for a trade like that to happen anyway. Next, we've got God4W. Billy gives P. Will most of Vooch's offensive shots to catch the Bucks off guard and play kind of the Bucks style with their big three, and gives Vooch the Lopez role. With that being said, Bulls in 4. Well, Bulls aren't winning in 4, I can tell you that much, which I know you're probably getting, judging by the emoji there at the end. Now, as for your take, I mean, it's probably the smart thing to do in giving P. Will more shot attempts, even more attempts than Vucevic, because here's the thing. Part of the reason for why the Bulls struggled so much down the stretch is they became incredibly predictable as a team on offense. Teams took note of that and made the adjustments as such to stop DeRozan to focus more on Vucevic in the post rather than stepping out to guard Vucevic on the three-point line, since his shot wasn't effective from outside this season. Even though it's relying a lot on a guy like Patrick Williams, who is only 20 in his first playoff series, to take some of those shots away from Vucevic, who is a veteran, I feel like you have to at least try it and see if it catches the Bucks off guard. Like you said, because a lot of teams probably haven't really studied Patrick Williams in their scouting reports, because there really just isn't much to go off on, considering he only played 17 games this season, averaging 24 minutes a game. So I like the idea of it, but I would be lying if I said I was a little concerned that it might be too much for a young dude to take on that kind of role in his first playoff series, but he has been showing more and more confidence with every passing game, so that is encouraging. Next, we've got Gilsey07. DeMar DeRozan's season was just a fluke like Randall's season last year, then he'll fall back to earth next season. No, I disagree. First of all, as incredible of a season as DeMar DeRozan had, he did somewhat come back down to earth after the All-Star break. Second, DeRozan was still an incredible player even before the season. Like, people forget that he was always a scoring machine, always averaging over 20 points per game, even in a lesser role in San Antonio. And he even improved his passing over the last few seasons to become more of a playmaker. Like, yes, this season was surprising, given the type of numbers that he was putting up and insane efficiency that he was playing with, especially in the fourth quarter, but I wouldn't call it a fluke of a season to say that he comes back down to earth next season. I mean, in a way, we're kind of almost expecting him to have at least somewhat of a decline, given the fact that he's going to be 33 years old. Like, I would be shocked if he had a repeat of what he was doing this season next year. Next, we've got Axel Issen. The Bulls will sign Zion through a sign and trade of Lavine. Zion, if fully healthy, is Giannis, KD type of player. That's an interesting one. Definitely the first time I've seen a Zion for Zach sign and trade scenario. Well, first, let me start by saying if is the big word there. You said if fully healthy. That's a pretty important piece, because Zion, this being his third season in the league, has only played 85 games in 3 seasons. That's barely a third of available games. He's missed the entire season this year, with his rehab continuing to get pushed out. And for a guy with his size and athleticism, who relies a lot on his athleticism, only 21 years old, to be having these kind of health issues that early on in his career is a major concern. Now, let's say in the event he does get fully healthy, no question, he's a generational talent level player. The guy made the All-Star game in his sophomore season, averaging over 27 points per game. He is a force, no question, when he's healthy. I wouldn't go as far to say that he's Giannis KD level good, but I get it. He has superstar potential. Now, doing a sign and trade for Zach, I mean, that is a huge risk, because Zion could turn out to be a player who just never stays healthy, and you trade away one of your best players and set your franchise back as a result. At the same time, though, you're kind of taking on a risk giving Zach Lavine a max contract and making him the centerpiece of your franchise when even he has had his own health issues. And of course, the debate still goes on. Can he be your number one piece on a contending team? Because paying him near $40 million a year for the next 5 years, you're basically committing to Zach being that guy, being that number one option on a contending team. So that's a risk in and of itself. I would venture to say that it's less of a risk than trading Lavine for someone like Zion, but Zion is definitely more of a high risk, high reward scenario. And you could actually make a sign and trade of Lavine and Zion work, since Zion is actually going to be max extension eligible this offseason. But boy, paying Zion a max contract when he didn't even play at all this season, again, a big risk. Next, we've got Nick Kerr, trade Zach for Melo to complete the prophecy of the Chicago Bulls. Well, I'm not sure what prophecy you're talking about, unless, of course, it's the LeVar Ball's prophecy that all three of his sons would be on the same NBA team together, which would mean Jello would join the Bulls as well, right? I mean, trading Zach Lavine for LaMelo Ball, you also sometimes have to take a step back and see what the Hornets are doing. They're making LaMelo Ball their franchise player, and they're going to start building around him. Why would they trade their 20-year-old all-star who hasn't even come close to peaking for Zach Lavine? Again, another all-star, a great player, but he's 27 and likely doesn't have the kind of ceiling that LaMelo Ball has in terms of his overall skill set. Like, the Hornets aren't going to make that move. Also, Lonzo and LaMelo play the same position, so I'm not even sure how they would coexist on the same team as much as LeVar would like to think that they would. And look, guys, I know a lot of people are throwing out a ton of sign and trade hot takes for Zach Lavine, but let's wait and maybe see how the guy does in the playoffs. Just my perspective on the matter. Anyway, guys, I'm going to end it there for this week. Be sure to leave your takes in the comments below for next week for your Would You Rather scenarios. Of course, don't forget to join the live game chat for the Bulls playoff game starting on Sunday. Also, give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram if you would like. Link to those can be found in the description. And as always, guys, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.